Hello, everyone. So nice to see so many friendly faces in this virtual space. My name is Sage Sidley, for those of you who do not know me. I'm an intermedia artist located in Kajiptuk, currently known as Halifax in Nova Scotia. I'm a recent NASCAD University MFA graduate and originally from Roslyn, British Columbia. I obtained my Bachelor of Fine Arts at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan, where I worked there for a few years. In my practice, I work with ideas of place and technology in the forms of expanded drawing to explore digital and physical spatial interactions with the fluctuant roles of the observer and the observed. I'm also a drawing instructor and have taught at numerous public institutions in BC and Nova Scotia. To be clear, I am not a professional cybersecurity expert. This is a passion project connected to my research and my recent MFA thesis.
Hello, my name is Courtney Cassidy, and I'm an interdisciplinary artist and also the interim executive director at the Center for Art Tapes, which we'll also be referring to as CFAT in the talk. For anyone who doesn't know about CFAT or what we do, we are a media art organization that supports artists working with media technologies by providing subsidized public access to our professional equipment, educational resources, facilities, technical expertise, mentorship, and other forms of professional and creative support. We're located in Halifax's central north end on Maitland Street. If you'd like to learn more about us, please feel free to check out our website, which I'll add to the chat now, or send me an email.
Excellent. And hi, everyone. I'm Luba. I am here on behalf of MSVU Art Gallery, where I work as young curator. The gallery functions as a visual arts resource for Mount St. Vincent University, as well as communities served by the university, Metro Halifax residents, and art publics everywhere. We devote a significant part of our activities to representing women as cultural subjects and producers, and also encourage interdisciplinary approaches to knowledge. And so we're very pleased to be co-hosting this presentation today. And now to begin, I want to acknowledge that the research, creation, and presentation of this virtual workshop has been and is being conducted in Mi'kma'ki, the unsurrendered and unceded land of the Mi'kmaq Nation. This territory is a subject of the treaties of peace and friendship with which the Mi'kmaq and the Wolastoqey people first signed with the British Crown in 1725. Many of us who are gathered here today are settlers and uninvited guests on this land. And we acknowledge that we're privileged to live, grow, and work here under these treaties, which represent an ongoing relationship between nations. We're all treaty people, and as treaty people, it's our responsibility to uphold these treaties and take action to end ongoing colonial and state violence. And in this chat here, we'll be sharing some resources on how to support Indigenous resistance and decolonial resistance in Mi'kma'ki. We also invite you, as we are in this virtual environment, which can sometimes feel untethered or intangible or dematerialized, we also invite you to consider the intersections of the digital and the physical, which includes working to end ongoing colonial violence, both locally and globally. We acknowledge that data is rooted in location, that location is the land, and that the land has power.
And we'd also like to acknowledge the history of African Nova Scotians on this land and what it means for where I am right now at CFAT in Halifax's central north end, an area that has historically been the home to African Nova Scotian families. Last month, there was a rally organized by Africville survivors, their descendants, and their supporters, demanding for reparations for the wrongful destruction of Africville and the dispossession and displacement of its community. The anti-Black racism and strategies for displacement of this community have been ongoing, and they go back hundreds of years. And in the 1960s, white councilors and city bureaucrats ordered the eradication of Africville to prioritize industrial interests. Where Africville once was is now the space for private housing, ramps for the A. Murray McKay Bridge, the Fairview Container Terminal, and shamefully a dog park. The movement for compensation and reparations has been ongoing for decades, and it's picking up steam. There is currently a mutual aid fund for former residents and descendants of Africville, as well as an online template to demand reparations from our governments. I will post some resources in the chat that include an article covering the rally that happened last month, as well as some spaces where you can lend your support. I think Luba might have dropped out of the call. Maybe we'll give her a couple minutes to join us again.
Oh. And that's the workshop. Thanks so much for coming, guys.
Hi, everyone. Maybe I can take over from what she was going to say.
Okay.
Okay. I'm seeing that she's just joined again.
I'm so sorry I got disconnected, folks. Is everyone still on? Yeah? Okay, my apologies. Okay, so yeah, so I'll go ahead and present the workshop. I don't know where we were. Okay. Oh. Excellent. Sorry, Courtney. Yeah.
No problem. I was just, if you want to just go for it with the workshop intro.
Absolutely. Right. So welcome everyone to Connect to Protect. This workshop is designed and led, like I said, by interdisciplinary artist Sage Sidley, and it's co-presented by MSVU Art Gallery and the Center for Art Tapes. Just so you know, the workshop will be recorded, so we're not asking you any direct questions. We're not asking you to share any personal information or turn on your camera. And we do ask that you please respect those who choose to turn on their cameras by not taking any screenshots. The workshop will go over procedures to protect your personal information on your devices in 7 easy steps. We ask that you be prepared to follow along with your smartphone or laptop and to take notes if you choose. Make sure your devices are plugged in and have enough charge. And keep in mind that some of the procedures will include logging into accounts, downloading programs, installing add-ons, and accessing web pages. So you will need an internet connection and your login information for your phone and App Store or Play Store, whichever you use. Some of the contents that we'll be sharing today can be anxiety-inducing and frustrating to execute. Please feel free to take a break from your screen if you so desire. And that can take many forms. So you can turn off your video, you can mute yourself or the speakers, or you can close your computer. That's totally acceptable. The workshop recording and additional resources will be available on the site connect-project.ca after the workshop, and you can go back and view those at your leisure. If you experience technical difficulties, such as trouble accessing a link or setting, please alert the facilitator in the chat, and that could be either myself or Courtney as well. Will be attending the chat. And you can also use the raise hand function. Technology, and especially in regards to altering default settings, is often not user accessible. So feel free to reach out for support. And we ask also that you be patient with yourself and with the process. A few things to keep in mind as well is we recognize that you might have strong reactions or points that you want to make about the content, and that's great. We definitely want that. We encourage you to save those comments to the end of the workshop, though, and we'd be happy to add your suggestions to the resource page over on our website, and also discuss them after our planned presentation. Other notes to keep in mind before we begin is that the workshop will be recorded, and it's being recorded right now. That to ask technical questions, please write those in the chat or use the raise hand function rather than saying them from the get-go. Please save your non-technical questions for the end of the workshop. And keep your microphone on mute until the end of the lecture. Your video, you can choose to keep on or off. And to respect other participants joining us today, we ask that you refrain from essentially being intolerant or belligerent. And in general, we just ask that you please take care of yourself. And we will reserve the right to ask anyone to leave the space if they're engaging in behavior that is discriminatory or violent in any way. And both Courtney and I will be on hand as moderators to review the comments section. So feel free to message us directly if anyone's behavior is making you feel uncomfortable. So with all that being said, I want to thank you all for joining us today. And let's begin the data detox.
Thank you so much, Liuba and Courtney, for your introductions and land acknowledgement. I'm just going to share my screen to start the presentation. Okay. So welcome to Connect to Protect. In just 7 easy steps, we are going to reconnect with ourselves and our data. After this workshop is complete, you will come out completely rejuvenated and transformed. Let's start all together with one large inhale and a big exhale. Okay, once more. Inhale, connect, exhale, protect. This is about you and your data. For the best results, you must be in a comfortable position. This includes facing your screen on your digital devices and having a strong internet and power connection. Without these connections, your rejuvenation cannot begin. These connections will keep us grounded during the workshop, and whenever you're overwhelmed, just remember, inhale, connect, exhale, protect. Step 1, start fresh, rejuvenate yourself. We're going to change the name of your device. Have them asking, who are they? So to do this step, what you're going to do on your Android or iPhone is log right into your settings, go into About Phone, and change your device name. Be creative. This is unique. Remember, as you are choosing your new brand of you, that anyone in a public space, such as a cafe, will see this name and they will wonder who exactly you are. I'll give you a few moments to do this step or take notes to complete this step on your devices. Step 2, you guys still with me? Now we're going to nourish your relationships. We're going to update your location status for a happier, better relationship. Now that you have a new name, we have to nourish those relationships in between. Your location status is a part of you. Its well-being reflects your well-being. Let's make it fresh. Let's have it only when using or never. You're gonna keep in your settings on your phone, and you're gonna go, depending on which device you have, either under Apple, privacy, under location services. This is where you get to decide what kind of relations do you want with each of your apps. If you're on your Android, you're going to go under apps and notifications, advanced, app permissions, and location permissions. I'll give you a few moments to recreate those relationship boundaries for a stronger you. You'll have them asking, where are they? Really think about how you want to define yourself. How you want to wake up every morning for the new you. We're going to move on to step 3. Step 3 is saying goodbye to unwanted apps. Declutter your app zone. Keep the good relationships and not the bad ones. Here you're going to go onto your home screen, and you're going to decide which apps really are working for you and the ones that are just taking. For your Apple, you're going to do a long hold on your applications and then click delete app. For Android, it's a little bit more complex. Bear with me for the new you. You're going to go to your home screen, do the long hold, click app info, and uninstall. An important tip: delete your account and any photos associated with your account before you delete the app from your device. Just because you've deleted the app doesn't mean you've deleted your account. Start with a clean slate, completely fresh. Are you guys still with me? Take a few more moments, make sure everyone's on the correct path to the journey to the new them. Are we ready for step 4? We can wait for everyone to catch up. Hearing very positive remarks. Let's keep going. Step 4, switch up your browsing routine. A lot about discovering yourself is sometimes just switching things up. We're going to change your default browser. This is going to go to a rejuvenated, new, better, more private you. We're going to start on our phones. Stay in that same kind of mind space, baby steps. You're going to go onto your Apple Store or your Play Store. You might have to log in and use your password. Then you're going to search for Firefox. Firefox has great privacy settings that will keep you and your data safe, unlike Google, which often sells it to other people. Let's keep what's yours, yours. Once you've searched Firefox, click Install. This might take a few moments. If you're a little bit speedy, you can go ahead and do the same thing on your Mac or PC. Here you're going to open your current browser. This could be Google, Internet Explorer, and you're going to go to mozilla.org. You could also just search Firefox in your search engine. From here, you're going to go Firefox, Browsers, and then depending if you have a Mac or a PC, you're going to download for your desktop or iOS. Then click Install. We're going to be using this program a little bit later down the road, down our steps to our new selves. So we'll give it a little bit of moment to fully take root in your new identity. While you're waiting, it's a great time to relax and unwind. Maybe take a few more inhales and exhales. How are we doing? Okay, now that you've had your Firefox browser downloaded onto your computer, we're going to personalize it.
Sage, we have a quick question.
Great timing.
Thought so? If I have a Google brand phone, will Firefox make things difficult?
That's a great question. From my expertise, I have not experienced that yet in my rejuvenation routine, my morning routine there. I would recommend that it will not make things difficult. The one thing that might happen is your cross app sharing between your Google devices, such as your Google Drive, your Google Docs, etc., might not run as smoothly, but you can just use Firefox for your general search engine search browsing. The one thing you might have that happens is instead of being to access the search bar directly on your phone, you might have to open the Firefox application first and then search. Just a few more steps compared to the other devices. All right, are we ready for step 5? So now we're going to uplift your search engine. Do a little personalization to your new browser. We're going to do this in 2 steps. So first, we're going to pamper our mobile device. We're going to install DuckDuckGo on your smartphone. So we're going back and forth between devices to really get a holistic view on the new you. Are you ready? So on your Android phone or your Google phone, I'm sorry, I don't have the prompts for a Google phone. You're going to go under your Play Store or your Apple Store and search DuckDuckGo. This is not to be confused with Duck, Duck, Goose. Once you've opened the DuckDuckGo and installed it onto your device, make sure that you open it on your device. This will make sure that it's all warmed up and fully integrated into your mobile device. You will be prompted to see if you'd like this to be your default browser. You can do this option as well. However, if you recall, we've just added Firefox. I'm going to give you a moment and then I'm going to go through the step-by-step how to make DuckDuckGo your default search engine. So we're completely removing Google from our lives as we start fresh here. Okay, so once you have downloaded DuckDuckGo as an application on your phone and you've clicked it and opened it, you'll notice it takes you through a few prompts. Go ahead and go through those prompts. Take your time. Once you're ready, you're going to go back to your Firefox app. You're going to open it and click Settings. The settings are either located at the top right or the top left, depending on which model of Firefox you downloaded on your phone. Once you're in Settings, you can scroll down to Search Engine, and now you can update it to your brand new DuckDuckGo. Congratulations to a more free searching environment where you can calmly search the web with no data being tracked. Also, we have zero filter bubbles, so all the information you're getting has nothing to do with you. Give you a few more moments to catch up. You guys are doing great. I'm going to move on to step 2. Are you ready? Excuse me, it's actually step 6. Time flies when you're rejuvenating yourself. Treat yourself to a glossy new add-on. We're going to pamper ourselves this afternoon. We're going to install some add-ons to protect you as you browse. So what we're going to do is we're going to add these add-ons to our browser. Remember that browser that we just added, the Firefox? Now we're just going to upgrade it, personalize it in a way that will protect us the best. So you'll notice in the chat, there'll be some links you can click. You can also copy and you can also type out the links from the slide ahead. Each of these add-ons is going to protect you in a different way. Depending on which add-on you add first, you will follow the link and then go add to my Firefox browser. Each one's a little different. Depending on what type of security you'd like to have. All of this information will be on our website after the workshop. You can read more about each of these websites then and see exactly where they come from and how they're helping you. As you're adding each of them, I'll go through them briefly. So Privacy Browse Badger will stop websites from tracking you and taking your data. It's more of a holistic approach to protecting your data. uBlock Origin is from the same company and does a similar thing. It's often compared to AdBlocker Plus. HTTPS Everywhere is an additional add-on where no matter what web page you're on, it will always make it secure. You'll notice when you're on a web page, sometimes it will just say HTTP with no S. The S means secure. Remember, we always want to be secure. If some of the links aren't working, simply search in your DuckDuckGo the titles of these headings. Sorry for the inconvenience. Cookie auto-delete auto-deletes cookies that are tracking you. Cookies come from multiple websites, such as Google, Amazon, Facebook, Instagram, which is also Facebook. We want to make sure these cookies aren't attached to us. And the last, most important add-on is called the Facebook Retainer. This is talking about cookies as well, where we put Facebook in its own little bubble so it can't follow us around, but we can still use it for our pleasure. There's a few updated links in the chat. Treat yourself to these add-ons. You deserve them. I'm going to give you a few more moments, especially because we gave you broken links. If you're ahead of the game, bring yourself back to focus. This is about you. Feel your devices, where they sit with you in your body. Are you feeling more connected? Are you guys ready for the next step? Okay, so this is the last step, step 7. We're going to rediscover yourself. Please type in the following website into your browser, www.haveibeenpwned.com. Once you log onto this website, you can add your email. If you have multiple emails, you're going to have to do this a few times. I've posted a few alternatives here that all kind of do the same thing: Firefox Monitor and Google Privacy Checkup. What it reveals is all the accounts that you have participated in or signed up for, and if there's been a breach in the data, meaning someone's breached that website and possibly has your data or login information. Sadly, due to the time of this workshop, we will not be able to go through this together, but at least now you know. The next steps that you can do after this workshop, maybe with a nice warm cup of tea and a cookie, is you can go through each of these websites and either delete your account or change your password to make it more secure. Just remember, if you haven't updated your email password since you had that account that had been breached, you will also need to change the password for that email. Here's a helpful tip. To create a more powerful you and a more powerful password, you can create a passphrase. Let's do an example. You can choose a few random words, such as yogurt, wheel, fire, and you make a phrase. Yogurt wheel fire. Then add a few numbers and special characters. Yogurt wheel fire 37 and. What a catchy phrase to remember that no hacker will ever guess. Remember, don't use your name or your address or anything like your pet's name or your partner. These are really easy, and that's okay, but that's not for the new you. I'll give you a few moments to sit with your new self. I'm going to leave up our contact information here. Remember, all of this is accessible on the website Connect-Protect. Additionally, there's extra resources there if you really want to dive deeper into the new you and the new, no longer collected data you. As we're coming to an end on our workshop, let's all take one big inhale and exhale. Connect and protect. Next for our workshop, we're going to have a Q&A provided by and facilitated by Courtney Cassidy. Before we have our Q&A, I would like to leave room if there's any technical questions regarding any of the steps or any of the steps you'd like to go back to. If you're nervous to talk, you can always just put part in the chat. I see Kate has a technical comment.
Hi, Sage. Thank you so much. I just wanted to tell people that I discovered on my phone with, I think it was step number 1, where we were looking at or no, step number 2 was about um, preventing our phone from finding our location. And I thought I had that on lock. And then I snooped a little harder, and there's a section in my iPhone that's like special locations, and I found a folder that said home, and my phone knows exactly when I arrive home every night from work and when I leave in the morning. And I just had a really terrifying moment where I got to scroll through months and months and months and months of it identifying somehow my address, and yeah, it's bizarre.
Your phone is so dedicated to you.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to turn that off.
Good plan. I'm glad you discovered that.
Yeah, thank you for this workshop.
Thank you, Kate. Were there any steps that you missed after going through that rabbit hole?
I think I have to go back through the whole thing. Like, I definitely got the new browsers, and I think I just need to figure that out a little bit more, but thanks. This is feeling a lot better.
Good, I'm glad. Thanks, Kate.
So maybe if there aren't any other technical comments or questions, we could do like a 5-minute break, which can mean maybe as Sage recommended some deep breaths. I know I want some after realizing that I've been pwned several times. We can come back at, let's say, like 1:56 or so. Grab a drink of water, stretch around, feel in your body a little bit more after being in a virtual thing for a little bit, and see you soon. Hello, welcome back. Sage, I saw another question here, maybe before we start doing more questions. Do Android phones have a similar feature? Is that, Carly, are you, oh, go ahead.
Is this for the location
I think
specific one?
Yeah.
That is a great question. I'm actually not sure. It might have to be one of those things where you kind of dig into your settings. The one thing I noticed with Android phones, other than that are different than iPhones, is just they make it a lot more complex to view your settings. I feel like they're set up more like a desktop computer than how smartphones have kind of changed. But yeah, I can look it up for you though. But I didn't even know that there was a specific location function. The other thing that you can do is make sure whatever maps you have. So for example, Apple Maps also has a similar tracking function that Kate was talking about. I didn't include this in the workshop just because it can be very overwhelming and take a long time. I kind of just wanted to do the introduction steps, but if you go onto your Google account, you can do something similar where you can find your activity and make sure that it's turned off. So Google tracks your activity, not only all your searches, this includes your YouTube searches, as well as the ads you've clicked or the websites you've gone on, and also your location. You can, if you go under your Google activity, there's often a map showing exactly where you've been and gone. And Apple Maps has a similar function. So I would recommend in both those cases, just checking your settings and making sure they're turned off. So just to reiterate, that would be Apple Maps. So I just deleted Apple Maps from my phone personally, because they actually take a lot of information from you regarding your location. They could still be tracking that. I'm not sure, but at least it's a little bit, you can turn off the setting. And then similarly for your Google account, you can change whether they are taking your location and recording it. And of course, in many of these cases, they're still kind of recording it, but at least you can kind of have use some of your agency to turn some of those applications off.
Thanks for sharing that. So for the next little bit, the plan is to just kind of have a chat with Sage. I have some questions for her, but if anyone in the group has some questions, please feel free to chime in. You can do that by leaving some questions in the chat if you'd like me to read them out. Also, you can do the raise your hand feature. And yeah, I'm gonna get started. So I think we can all tell now that the way you're talking is a bit different than what we just experienced. And I wanted to know, like, I think that the idea of like cybersecurity or like where to even start in being safe on the internet or data collection stuff can feel really daunting and overwhelming. I certainly have that. So I wanted to know, like, how are you navigating that while also like facilitating a workshop like this?
Yeah, I think I wanted to kind of, now I can't get out of that way of talking. I was kind of trying to navigate it as a teacher, you often feel like you are performing and doing somewhat of a performance. And I feel like often because there's that performance aspect, you are taken away from this, or like disconnected from the subject matter. So I was kind of playing with that idea of a performance and adding like multiple layers to that context of I love DIY self-help videos. I think they're really funny. They also are very complex and completely rooted in capitalism. So I thought it was kind of, and they're often very like girly, and girls do them because you have to wear a face mask and get in the tub and then keep working and do all these really intense feminist roles, but don't forget to paint your nails. So I kind of like to play with like both those extremes. So I guess I'm kind of off your question, but I guess why I approach that way is because cybersecurity can feel really overwhelming, and it is. But kind of my philosophy, just from my own personal research, is that we can all take small steps to protect our data, and just making those small choices, just similar to like at a supermarket, kind of what you're choosing to support and what you're kind of choosing not to support. And by all of us kind of taking ownership of our data, or even just simply like what browser we're using or what search engine we're using, is going to completely start changing that narrative, is kind of my belief. So that's kind of what was behind this workshop, is not only in the arts, we don't really talk about cybersecurity as much, or it's not seen as important, but it's often seen as really inaccessible. And yeah, so I was trying to kind of play, I guess, with those multiple kind of contexts, overlapping them all, and kind of trying to have fun with it. I was holding back a laugh the whole time.
Yeah, I was laughing a lot during that.
I was like, it's good to approach very, very intense, traumatic, and violent things. Sometimes with a sense of humor, it's easier to take control or make it more accessible too.
Yeah, and I think like with so many of the buzzwords that you were using, like I was hearing the word rejuvenate a lot, which I thought was very funny. But there is also just like such a darkness in some of that use of language, in the ways that it's sort of like perpetuating these like puritanical societal structures that have been ongoing for a very long time. Yeah, so I love that there was like a real sense of sarcasm. So I appreciate that.
I'm glad you saw it as, I was like, I hope no one thinks I actually talk like this, but
I don't think you talk like that, actually.
I was watching so many self-help videos. Oh, my favorite was, you have to change your morning routine so you can wake up and feel good. They say that so much, like you gotta wake up and feel really good, declutter, clean up. Kind of creepy.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, that language has been around, or like, you know, those frameworks or approaches of like always be happy have been around for a long time. And like you said, it's very much a part of capitalism. But yeah, like with the, I totally lost my train of thought.
Like capitalism.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, with I guess with like 2020 and the hell year that we're in, like that's happening. I find just like on a constant daily basis, I'm seeing that language. And so like, I don't know, what's your relationship to seeing that on your phone? Because I imagine that you also go on your phone and take in social media on a regular basis.
Yeah, completely. And I feel like that totally blew up during the pandemic, where it's something that a lot of us, we haven't experienced a global lockdown. And yeah, instead there was a lot of rhetoric of, yeah, like pamper yourself, take this time to like have a bath and renovate your house, and this idea that we have to keep working and keep going, and where sometimes it's like, this is actually very scary, very traumatic, and it's okay. You don't have to remake yourself. You can be upset and sad and like experience those emotions. And I think that kind of goes into that kind of dialogue as well, where I don't know, even just using that language, I felt like such a robot. And I feel like sometimes that's what it's asking us to do, is just be a robot, have your juice cleanse and get on that bike and also do all these other things and you're fine, like pandemics, whatever. And you may not have great skin.
Totally. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about how you arrived to surveillance in your practice, because this goes beyond just this workshop. Like surveillance is a major focus of your artistic practice.
Totally. I'm sorry, I just saw a comment from Lucas about no raise hand function. I actually don't see it either.
I wonder if maybe Lucas could ask their question directly. Yeah, I'm also not seeing a raise hand function. So.
Yeah, I just don't want to interrupt Courtney's question then.
We'll come back to it.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
My question is, as an artist researching things online, like self-help videos and stuff like that, is a good example. Especially when you're consuming it at a distance, like ironically, or just for like, you know, objective research purposes. I know that objective is a problematic word there, but how do you not get sucked into that yourself? I've been in this position, I think, a couple times where I start digging into some subject matter and just absolutely end up down the rabbit hole, like consumed by it, even though I approach it at a distance. How do you navigate those waters?
That's a great question. I feel I'm trying to think here. I guess because maybe this kind of actually ties into Courtney's question as well, because I've been researching and thinking about surveillance, which is all, and like cyber security, which can be intense. I feel like sometimes I can get sucked in, but often because I'm kind of navigating it through, like I'm not only watching the self-help, or I'm not only reading these things, but I think because I'm coming at it kind of, I have like because I'm coming at it from different angles, I have more of like a critical toolkit that allows me, I don't know, I think cybersecurity also hasn't really freaked me out. It's just something that I'm really interested in, where I've kind of approached it similar to spiders, I could say, where I'm really freaked out by spiders. They really terrify me. But then the more I learn about them and their environment and like their connection to me and what kind of controls I have, what kind of controls the spider has. Anyways, I'm kind of riffing here, but it kind of makes me feel better. So I think by transforming this into my research, I feel like I have more control. So I think I kind of don't maybe get as terrified. I think I get sucked into other things with my work though. Like that PowerPoint presentation, I would say, was kind of a rabbit hole. I got really into clip art. So I don't know if I really answered your question very well there, but I would say just by like researching it from different angles, makes me, I feel like I have more control. But having said that, there are numerous things that other artists research that freak me out, that I don't know how they look at all the time. But I feel fine with cybersecurity. So it could just also be different boundaries in that way as well. As far as I'm not sure if this is what you're asking, but like as advice goes, is I guess like putting on different hats and trying different angles and maybe indulging in the rabbit holes. I think rabbit holes are great.
It's really good advice. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucas.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, and I guess like rabbit holes, I think that leads nicely into what I was thinking about earlier, just around like, how did you get to surveillance in your practice?
Oh, yes. Okay, so this is such a rabbit hole. So I traditionally, I guess, my practice in my undergrad was I dabbled in lots of different disciplines, lots of different narratives, contexts, etc. But I kind of stuck with portraiture as the main one, as I was, I guess my main BFA thesis was on portraiture and sight. And so a lot of what comes with portraiture is that relationship of the subject and the artist. Who's observing who, who's watching who, where is the consent in that, where is the power relationship or the power dynamic, and often the artist having the power over the subject. So how I render you gives me power, and you're kind of as a subject, there is where there's that kind of relationship, where of course there's the contract between the artist and the subject to make sure it's not a bad relationship, of course. But I think in thinking about that relationship as me as the artist, and beginning to think about surveillance for, well, I'm watching my subject, but who's watching me, and kind of how we navigate those spaces of kind of both those inherently being there. Surveillance has always been a part of our culture in some way or form. It's just becoming, I think it just is coming in a new form now with technology. And a new form that we are all new in navigating, and as well as new in having policies or protections around. So I often like to think of, someone was explaining this to me, where the internet was a teen when I was a teen. So the internet's still aging, and so are our devices, and how we are in connection with our devices. But I guess in connection to my research, I often then like to think of, if I'm illustrating the relationship of myself and my data, or myself and these devices, what does that portrait look like? What's the power dynamic? And kind of coming at it from that scope or lens. So I guess that's kind of how I filtered into digital surveillance, is through the lens of drawing and portraiture.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, there is so much there in the relationship of the subject and the artist. I think what comes to my mind when I first think of surveillance, and I think this might be the case for a lot of people, are like big bad surveillance things, like state surveillance, police surveillance, data collection on the line that's used to serve large corporations to sell us stuff. And I think like something that you included, that you talked about in your MFA thesis exhibition, was not all surveillance is bad surveillance. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess to kind of give a little bit of background on it, is because there's so many different forms of surveillance, I really wanted to bring it kind of speak from my own perspective, so not take on other people's perspectives, but something that we all experience. I did not feel like I was able to speak to the violence that is caused by state surveillance, or surveillance, surveillance by the government. I was more focusing on social surveillance, so state surveillance being when aspects of the police or government are monitoring, surveilling. This can be done through IDs, numbers, all that kind of data, but also in the form of videos, or tracking or monitoring certain neighborhoods. So I kind of point to different artists who deal with that, and I think are better to speak to those forms of surveillance. I kind of wanted to focus more on social surveillance, so how we watch one another, and how that kind of transformed through our devices, so that anyone can take your picture or take your video, and how that then becomes this new social dynamic between how we interact, similar to if you think about before we had our devices in a cul-de-sac, how all the kitchens face the cul-de-sac. So there's there's kind of that form of surveillance as well. And in those forms of surveillance, of course, there can be violence towards others, and like monitoring and gatekeeping in neighborhoods. But I guess the kind of good, or the kind, I guess saying that not all surveillance is bad is because there's so many complex versions of it that we deal with every day. The one example I give of a moment where I feel safe with surveillance, the example I gave in my thesis is being a female and walking alone at night. It's really scary. It's can be really intimidating, daunting. A lot of people experience that depending their backgrounds. And so when there's lots of people around, so we're kind of surveilling one another without, just by being within a similar space, so like a busy street or a street with lots of street lights, I feel safer. Of course, this can change depending on who the person is. So that's kind of the complexities I was thinking about or talking about is, well, when do we experience good things from surveillance, and maybe surveillance kind of being a very powerful negative term, but thinking about, that's kind of why I changed it to observing observe. So thinking about what it means to be watched and watching, and when is that good? Does that exist, or is it all bad? But I think it can be a lot more complex than that, not to take away from those violent negative aspects of it.
Yeah, it makes me think of like how community surveillance can be beneficial at times, or I think I would have a hard time, I have a hard time using that word just because of how much I relate it to like really kind of darker, sinister forms of surveillance. But yeah, like that's so interesting, like kitchens looking out on a cul-de-sac and there being a sort of sense of like wanting to know what's going on in your neighborhood, and like how there's so much more in recent years conversations around like strides towards safer spaces, and like what does that mean, and like keeping an eye out for behavior within a community space. And it makes me think of a section in your thesis show where you talked about the complexities around identity when like being surveilled, and you talk about the experience of, like you just said, like being a woman at night walking home alone, and how that can be like really scary and dangerous at times, and then also recognizing like your whiteness and like what privilege has come along with that, particularly related to like state surveillance or like interactions with the police. And you drew connections between that into like online data collection and surveillance. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, completely. So kind of been thinking about how these systematic racism is completely within the structure, and how, surveillance is used quite violently to imprison people of color. But then also online, where I was doing a lot of research I was like, well, the internet comes from this idea of open source, everyone's free, anyone could be anonymous, like we're all on an equal plane. This did not happen with the internet. As we know, there's so much racism, and as well as violence with data collection, but also with like gatekeeping provided by like certain tweets will be reacted differently depending on your appearance, or they'll be flagged or not flagged. So flagging being a part of kind of that narrative as well. So I think it's good to recognize those aspects of like online spaces as well. However, like kind of what you mentioned with online spaces, they often also do the similar thing where that watching out for one another to create a safer space can be really, really nice, helpful, positive to the words of the community. But then also where we can now have communities that we can't have in physical spaces. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question correctly, but that yeah, I guess in kind of trying to look at both sides of how we use that. And I think by doing that, we can decide what decisions we want to make of how we are transforming both these spaces to be safe, and where it's the hopeful, the positive side of surveillance. We're watching out for one another, and protecting one another. Maybe protecting one another from Google rather than kind of those narratives. I hope I answered your question. I feel like I kind of got a little.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I don't think there's any right way to answer.
Okay.
It just feels so messy and kind of all over the place. So it makes sense to also.
It's messy. It's very messy, and like I recognize, yeah, as a white person looking at these topics, I have extreme privilege in how I experience them, and so I guess just trying to kind of look at how we can all use these tools just in simple ways, where kind of with data collection, how it works too is often the narrative around data collection is, well, why do I care? Like they can have my data, I have nothing to hide. But the real danger with data collection is actually as our collective data is being collected and going into that database that then is used collectively to understand our behavior, and then that behavior algorithm, I think, behavior algorithm. So all that data going into navigating how we behave online and in physical spaces, and then that being used, currently used for advertising, but also going into larger things that I'm not even actually aware of. So this is all touched upon in the book Surveillance Capitalism. So where surveillance is now being used, where it's kind of being sold back to us. So our data is being collected and then it's sold back to us in forms of ads and connecting to our behavior. So which can be very scary and daunting. I think I have like more of a positive perspective, where the more we talk about it and think about it and educate ourselves about it, hopefully we can get more rules and engaged, and also just being aware. So being aware of these platforms, also being aware of ourselves in those situations of surveillance, so flagging people or etc., where those power relationships that are inherently there. Yeah.
We have some great comments from Lucas and Carly in the chat. Lucas is saying, in a healthcare setting, surveillance can be really positive as well. Really interesting to think of the positive side of this. Mm-hmm. And then Carly added, it makes me think of the COVID tracking app, which for anyone who doesn't know, I believe it's like you download the app and it does GPS tracking, and it's based on like having a little bit more of a community or like a public access to where COVID cases are moving in our region.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it kind of, I think, goes into like now that making the decision whether you want to share your location or not, and how that can really be a safety concern. So what does it mean when someone knows your location, especially at protests? So protests, being aware of when your location is on and how that can be used in a negative way as well. It's easy to go to the negative, I guess. But so yeah, I think just talking about these things and being aware of our relationship with our applications, and then being aware of our settings, etc. There's a great Amnesty International page that I think it's on the Connect to Protect website, talking about how you can bring your phone to protests in in a safe way where your data and location can't be used against you. I will include that in the website, but a helpful tip is just when in doubt, put your phone on airplane mode. So that would be when there's no incoming transmission or no outgoing transmission. So you won't be able to receive messages. However, you are not also transmitting any form of data or location.
Love that tip. I've never thought of that.
Just when in doubt, go into airplane mode. When in doubt, throw your phone into the ocean. Just kidding.
Cool. Yeah. I'm not sure. Like, does anyone else have any other questions or thoughts about the workshop, SAGE's practice?
Also, there is a so the idea with the website in connection to this workshop was just also to make it more accessible. We're all zoomed out. Attending live meetings is really hard. I appreciate you all being here. But it's a way that you can kind of come back to it. You can share the resource, but there's also a submission, inquiry, and comment form on there. So if you have any questions for me that come up later, or you have some great resources that you'd like to share, you can just fill out that form. It just goes directly to my email. Also, I guess we could talk about the website in the form. Lucas sent me a great message before applying, asking the credentials of the website. So I chose to use a open source platform. Open source is great because it's often kind of the people behind the scenes that are fighting for data rights and for internet to be accessible to everyone in all kind of forms. So I use open source platform where you can, the data isn't collected by a corporation. All the code is just stored on my computer and then published just using GitHub, which is like a coding, open source coding site. Just if anyone's interested, I wanted to really make sure that the website values aligned with the workshop values. So that's also a resource that you can use for your website building needs. You just need to buy a domain name. I got mine from GoDaddy, but maybe someone has a different suggestion. I don't know how much I like GoDaddy anymore. Like, this is being recorded, oh no.
We're going to lose our sponsorship from GoDaddy.
Hoover's really good. I know, we're going to lose our sponsorship from GoDaddy. Sorry, Lucas, I interrupted you.
Yeah, Hover has some really good kind of like built-in protections and stuff like that. When you register a domain, you have to provide your email address, your home address, and stuff like that, just for, I think, tracking purposes. A domain provider needs to know that stuff. But Hover has protections so that no one else online can access that. I registered a domain with GoDaddy or some other provider like that. It didn't have that protection on, and I get spam to this day from just random strangers online because of that.
Right. Okay, that's a great tip. Thank you. I'm going to add that. Hoover.
Carly has a quick comment.
I guess two quick things. One, like, I just love how you use the word detox, but it's like actually detoxing in this case, because I feel like it's like, oh, we're doing the lemon juice cleanse, detoxing our toxins, when that doesn't actually happen. But here, like, you're actually deleting data, which, like, you still, like, I can't see it being deleted, but I assume it's being deleted. And then the second thing, I guess, just about the COVID app. Like, I think a lot of us are really excited about it and really gung-ho. And I don't want to say like I relied on it, but I definitely felt like it was a nice safety net. And then I saw a post that somebody shared that people with Android phones, their tracking app wasn't working, or like it only started tracking when you downloaded it, and then like it didn't check for like a month. So I like had no idea. I was like, oh, I love that it's tracking my every movement and I don't have to worry. And then it turned out it actually wasn't. So I just think it's a really interesting way, like when you choose to, you know, support being tracked versus I don't want people to know my location.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And also where it's kind of, yeah, there's a reason why we see benefits in being tracked on our applications, why so many of us want that. I mean, the Find My Phone application too. Yeah, I guess it's complex in that form too. And I think it kind of ties back to like that, not gatekeeping, but where then if you were in the wrong location, now you're the villain because you know, we have the proof against you. And so it can kind of turn really scary really quick as well. But I think as long as we're like aware of the decisions we're making and making little changes and having discussions like these, determining when is it beneficial, but also who is it beneficial for and who is it not beneficial for. The COVID app, crazy.
It makes me think too about like I've been using DuckDuckGo on my internet browser for the last few months now, and how annoyed I am when it doesn't know my location, so things don't just come up in the way that is really convenient for me anymore. So there's like, I think there's something to be said about like, I mean, there's so many different tactics that are being used, but it's so convenient for them to be taking particular parts of our data and like reflecting it back at us. It's also terrifying, but
yeah, completely. I use the restaurants near me way too often. Like, I'm hungry.
yeah, it's fun. It's easy. Cool. Thanks so much. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to chime in now or throw it in the chat. Otherwise, maybe we'll hang out for a couple more minutes. And if anyone has any questions for me or CFAT, let me know. Thanks for coming.
Right. Okay. So I have a question that was submitted to me anonymously for the group, and I'll just read it. I'm told by a few artists that I should not be concerned about my final art projects being seen widely on the internet by anyone, and that it is good exposure. How do artists here feel about this? Do you mind sharing your art ideas on the World Wide Web? I felt just a good preview of my art project is good enough on my own website. Other than that, it should be kept private until you want to exhibit. So I guess some questions around sharing your artworks on the web and in what form to do so.
That's a fabulous question. I'm excited to see if other people will also chime in. It'll be nice to have different perspectives. It's definitely something that I, as an artist, have struggled with. I think the best case scenario is when you are aware of what website you are using. I think the one thing that, I mean, I haven't even done, but I think is a good option is changing the image quality of your photos so they can't be copied and pasted to a high quality, where there's the image of your work. However, once downloaded or copy or pasted, it can't be like blown up or reprinted. The other thing is I've seen on other artists' websites, because I'm not very familiar with code or how it works, is that you can't actually download or copy or save the image, but kind of like so that would be like the extreme way to go about it. But I know using programs like such as Instagram or Facebook is kind of that similar give and take, where Instagram has become such a huge push and pull in the art community, but then also it's where a lot of artists get their art taken. So I'd be interested in hearing from other people their thoughts on that as well.
I'll chime in sort of with what I know from an institution perspective. I know that MSVU, for instance, and some other organizations that I've worked with will write it into their agreements with, so exhibition agreements with artists that like specify that we'll have any files or photographs or documentation of the works that we share online will be limited to a certain image quality, so that it isn't giving sort of very advanced, I suppose, reproduction of the work. So that's something also that I encourage artists to assert in when writing agreements with organizations, that they can certainly specify the form of reproductions that are made.
And I guess along with that is having an understanding that your, like any reproductions of your work, so I'm developing a few websites, and there should be contracts with the artist if your work is going on someone else's website, and you should be getting paid CFAT fees. So I guess that it goes into your contract, and also your rights that the digital space is a space that you should still get paid for those reproductions.
I just wanted to say some work was on the internet, a complete video, but it was meant to be site specifically seen. And somebody was wondering whether they should use it. Well, only because I proposed it to be shown right there where that person is. But what they did first was just search for it on the internet, and he came back with a different, I think because he didn't see it in the site itself, which would have been difficult, he didn't really like it. Well, he didn't put it that way, but he just said that didn't do anything for me. And I thought, well, I believe that if he would have seen it on the site, he would have felt differently. So now I'm beginning to think, well, you got to be careful to put in, if you intend it to be on a different site rather than, I guess, seen on I don't know. It means to be seen on a site. So then I've decided I'm not going to put it out there. It's just, it's too bad in a sense, because I think I've learned that people get a different opinion on things when they see it like that on your work. So that's one reason. So I don't like it on the internet, the whole project.
I think that's very, very fair and a hard choice to make, but sometimes this makes sense to totally not have it up there at all. I thought of another.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, for the process photos. I like to make, again, hearing from someone else would be great as well, but I like to make my posts as cryptic as possible, and I think as artists we can do that. So I think if you're posting in process work or your work as well, you can kind of take it could be a little bit secretive in just the way that you share it, maybe even.
I just want to read what Lucas has put in the chat here. I think just talking about like sharing artwork online, it depends how much you care. My brother is an artist and has 300 DPI images. For anyone who doesn't know what that means like a high resolution image on his website because it's convenient for him and galleries. I love that tip though, thinking about like how to kind of prohibit people from like saving your work or resharing it, like saving it in a low resolution JPEG file is going to mean that it's not going to save well or be reused very well.
Yeah, I had a friend who's a textile designer over in the UK, and she has like thousands or millions of like Instagram followers. Don't know how she got them, but I digress. And so she had her work stolen, and a fashion brand put her prints on bathing suits and a lot of clothing. And because she posts very high resolution images, both on her website and on Instagram. And she made this huge big deal about it, and there were lawyers involved and everything. And then like a couple months later, she just kept doing it. Like she just still posts the same quality images and still has that risk. Because I guess what the thing is with fashion, there's no copyright basically. You can pretty much change one little thing and it's your design. You can take it from anything. So I think, and she was like, it was bad publicity, but it was still publicity, and it still got me out there, which like I don't think is a great way of viewing things, but yeah, it's like sometimes it works, unfortunately, depending on how you're handling it.
That's such a great story. I think also in thinking about what you're sharing, I guess it kind of goes back to, yeah, like what you're sharing exactly and how you're framing it, whether it's like a high res design really like cropped in versus like a cropped out version of that design. Or I don't know, it's probably pretty annoying if you share a drawing and there's like your pencil and eraser on top of it or something, or little tricks. I guess Photoshop's pretty great, but I'm just going to read Lucas's comment. I work with found objects, so I don't really care who steals my images of my work. My materials are borrowed after all. It's true too. Okay, I think if there's no more comments or questions, Leoba and Courtney, what are you guys thinking?
Yeah, unless anyone else has any kind of closing thoughts or questions, maybe now's a good time to get away from our screens.
Absolutely, yeah. I would like to thank everyone for attending, and certainly Sage and Courtney for facilitating this workshop and managing the questions. I found it personally very helpful and thought-provoking, and I hope that folks have a chance to revisit the website and share it with their friends. So once again, thank you for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you guys. Nice to see you all. Stay safe out there.
Thank you. This was great.
Bye.
Bye, folks. Okay, excellent. So I'll go ahead and end the meeting if that's okay with everyone. Thanks again.
Thanks. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.